TUFF SHIFT. Hello, world, and welcome to another episode of TUFF SHIFT, the podcast where we unpack all that goes into surviving the job and living the dream. I am your host, Sean Patrick Murtagh, and I want to start this week's pre-shift off with a little unsolicited gratitude. That's right. We're giving thanks, and it's February. And it's funny, I wrote this opener before last night's shift, and last night working in the restaurant was completely awful. Probably one of the worst ones I've had in a while, but you know what? I said I'm going to start this with gratitude, and we're going to be grateful, and hopefully that will help calm my nerves and help me get over what a shit show last night was. And what I'm grateful for is this community that we're growing here with TUFF SHIFT. As you know, the entire inspiration behind this podcast was to highlight the ridiculous amount of talent that I've come across in my 105 years in this industry. To give my friends and coworkers a space to talk shop, share wild stories that could only happen in a restaurant, laugh at the crazy things we've lived through, but more importantly, to give them a platform to talk about their creative life and the amazing things they're doing outside of this very stereotypical survival job. I want the world to know just how talented they are. I want listeners to hear these stories and seek out these artists so they can experience them for themselves. This podcast, in unpacking the stereotype of why creative people just seem to find themselves in this industry, is just putting a name to the face. It's humanizing the people in this industry, what they are working towards, what they are willing to do, or actually what they're willing to put up with to sustain their careers, their dreams, and all of their endeavors. I want to build a community where artists and audiences can connect and support, follow, and uplift each other. Basically, we are building this audience here to build new audiences for my guests. We're going to pool all our resources. Yes, this is a pooled house. I know some of you guys don't like pooled houses, but this show is a pooled house where we're pooling our resources and helping each other as independent artists to grow a larger and more impactful online presence so we can reach more people with our music, our projects, concerts, films, books, shows, whatever amazing things you got going on that we need people to support. And listen, as someone who is still working in hospitality myself, still dealing with tough shifts, like last night where we got pummeled and everyone wanted to know my name. I've said it before. Please don't ask my name. You don't need to know my name. You're going to use it against me. You're not going to see me as a person. You're going to weaponize knowing my name is Sean Patrick. So just stop. And someone who is dealing with, angry chefs, guests from hell, all to keep my career and dreams alive. This podcast has provided me with not just another outlet, but a purpose and a mission. So you might be wondering where all of this unsolicited gratitude is coming from to inspire this pre-shift. Well, it's quite simple, actually. People are showing up. My friends, colleagues, and coworkers are stepping up to the plate. They are taking time out of their lives to come here and share of themselves and tell their stories, digging up tough shifts that live as distant memories or even recurring nightmares, telling us how it started and how it's going, and some of the tough shifts they've had to make in their personal lives along the way to roll with the punches, adapt, and move forward. So for that, I am extremely grateful for their generosity. My friends and family are tuning in each week, liking, sharing, subscribing, commenting, helping this podcast find its audience through their online engagement. It's as easy as that. And I know podcasts aren't for everyone, and I totally get it. That's wonderful. I was there at one point, so I really appreciate all of you who go out of your way to support what we're doing here when podcasts aren't your thing. all the texts, the messages, the comments, cheering me and my guests on and what we're doing here, the words of encouragement make it so much easier to do this. And one of the coolest things that's been happening, something I assumed and hoped would happen eventually, is that this podcast is not just connecting and reconnecting me with my friends and colleagues and coworkers, but it's connecting me with people beyond my circles and community. It's bringing me together with people that I've never met, but we have a connection. We have a bond because we share this industry. We have this industry in common. We share some traumas. We have dreams that make folding napkins in a dank, dark basement or breaking down bars at 4 a.m. worth 4 a.m. Sorry, sometimes I speak like I don't speak English. Um, worth every drop of blood, sweat, and tears. So before I continue going on sounding like some generic greeting card, I want to give you two examples of how this show is growing and how what it looks like, what I'm talking about here. So I have been working nonstop to get guests on this show, reaching out to friends I've worked with in theater, former coworkers, people that I've, well, people that I know from other areas of life, and have been extremely grateful for the time they have taken to fill out my guest questionnaire, get me their headshots and bios, making time, especially across time zones and working around the show schedule and work schedules and nap schedules. Even knowing the people you can count on, that I know you're going to show up, it's still amazing to experience when you do come through, when you do show up as I knew you would. So imagine my surprise when I not only start getting responses from people that I don't know off of social media, but I reached out to them because I think they're awesome and I love what they do and I know they'd have so much to contribute to the show. And they're like, yeah, that sounds great. I'd love to. Boy, do I have stories to share. And imagine my surprise when friends listen to the show and suggest people they know who would be great to have on the podcast. So I reach out to them and they're like, yeah, that sounds great. I'd love to. Boy, do I have stories to share. It's beginning to feel a little like Field of Dreams here. And really, just really imagine my surprise when people who represent people who work for or have worked in hospitality, they reach out to me to see if I'd be willing to have the people they represent on their show to help them promote their upcoming project. And I'm like, yes. Oh my God, yes, this is the community I want to build. This is the impact I want to provide for everyone who has ever worked in this back-breaking industry. But I have to keep my cool because I'm a professional broadcaster now. So I say things like, we'd love to have you on our show. Let me check my calendar. Now, the second thing that's been happening, kind of tying in the last part of people with representation reaching out with the earlier part of promoting my friends are finally getting what this show is for. Recently I've received a few messages from friends being like, "Hey, so I'd love to be on the show. I have this thing coming up, so could we possibly, find a time to help me get the word out, help me promote what I'm doing?" Oh my God, 10,000% yes. Emphatically yes. Use me, use me, use me. Oh my God, it's starting to feel like when Harry met Sally. Um, you already know I'm here to cheer you on and sing your praises. And this is one of the rare occasions where using your friends for your own personal interest is completely acceptable. So let me just make this crystal clear. Let me know what you got going on. Let me know when you can come on, and let's make it happen. Let's get the word out on how amazing you are. That's what we're here for. So, funny enough, whenever I have a pre-shift that, involves a lot of complaining or talking shit about chefs, managers, customers, coworkers, I worry that people will think that that's all this show is. And then when I have a pre-shift like this, where it's, lighthearted and filled with gratitude, I worry that people are gonna be like, what the hell? The name of the show is Tough Shift, not Kumbaya. So in attempt to restore balance, since we started this show off with gratitude, I'm gonna finish this pre-shift with three stock complaints I always have and will always have, and anyone who works in this industry will have, just to kind of get the equilibrium there. So let's finish off with some complaints. First of all, this one goes out to guests. Get your phone off the goddamn table. Get it off my bar. Get it out of my way. Just get all your stuff off the table. This isn't your office. This isn't your home. And when I'm coming to you with a drink or a hot plate of food, your phone and your junk is always exactly where I need to place it. I look at you. I look at your phone. I look back at you. I look back at your phone. I look at you one more time, and you still seem confused, genuinely shocked that I have to ask you, please move your phone so I can put this plate down before it burns off my fingerprints. How did you get this far in life? All right. The next one is for my coworkers, and for any coworkers, really. Don't make my job harder by doing the least amount possible. Just to be clear, I'm not saying this on behalf of the restaurant or the guests. You already know their last place. I'm looking out for myself and all the other coworkers whose jobs you are making difficult by just being lazy. On behalf of all of us who are going to have to hear management reprimand us and complain about how certain people are dropping the ball instead of, just directly speaking to the people who are dropping the ball. No one likes you. Do your side work. All right, and last complaint is, of course, for management. Oh my God, where are you? Why are you literally never around? That feels better. Now let's get on to the guest, shall we? Today's guest, very fittingly, is part of what inspired today's pre-shift of gratitude. A friend of mine out here in Los Angeles who has been very supportive of this show since day one said she had the perfect guest for me to have on the show. So we hopped on the phone. And let me say, I really wish I had recorded that phone conversation because I just had such a wonderful time listening to his stories. And it felt like the episode I wanted. So I'm going to do my best to try and recreate that phone call for all of you here today. With over 43 years working in the industry, today's guest has a lot to say. A multi-talented actor and singer and a cabaret artist, creating and performing his one-man shows in Chicago for 35 years. And he's also a baker too. Lots of talents, lots of hats he wears. You can hear his debut album, Intimate, on Apple Music and Spotify. And please keep an eye out for his upcoming autobiography, I Heard You the First Time, A Waiter's Memoir, which has also been adapted into a stage show. So it looks like I need to get my ass on a plane and get over there to see my newest friend and today's guest, John Vincent Mahady. I am so thrilled to have you. Our mutual friend, Joan Ryan, was so emphatic about how wonderful you are, the wonderful things you create in your performing life, and the fact that you've been working in this industry and have just so much to share. So the first two questions on this podcast are always the same. We're going to get started. What was your first job? What was, or as I like to call it, the gateway job into being the stereotypical actor, singer, artist, paying rent and surviving in hospitality? Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Well, first of all, I just want to say I woke up this morning. I'm very excited about being here today. And I thought, oh God, maybe I'll wake up and I'll look like George Clooney. And I woke up looking Rosemary Clooney. But other than that,
I love Rosemary. I love Rosemary
a
Clooney.
little hiccup. I did have, I started at early age. When I was in college at Northwestern, I worked at a ground round, believe it or not. where I developed a peanut allergy. Not because I really have a peanut allergy, but I stepped in so many peanuts that I never want to be around another peanut. Um, but I think that the thing that pivoted me into music and was and really I was in management of restaurant management for a few years, and then I did my first show at a club called Boombala, and so I started working at this great restaurant called Un Grand Cafe, which overlooks the Lincoln Park Zoo, right near the lake, Michigan, in a beautiful part of Chicago. And it was in a historic building, all French food. Loved it. And so that really allowed me, because the money was so great there, to do the other, also supplement my income with doing shows and not worry about getting, 5 covers there or 10 covers there. I mean, this club was great. My first show was sold out within 30 minutes. And then, so I feel like that really was the start, was Zoom Grand Cafe.
And do you have any tough shifts within your tenure in this industry that where just everything went wrong, it was a nightmare that still kind of haunts you or remains with you to this day? What any that stand out?
Yes, one in particular, actually. Well, there's many, but this one is probably paramount. Um, and it involves Un Grand Cafe. It actually turned into another French restaurant called Mon Ami Gabi. And every holiday season, since it's near the zoo, they would have zoo lights. So it was a residential area, but you would have 8,000 cars come to see the zoo lights. So every person that was coming, I would say maybe 80% of the people I wait on every night at that restaurant were my regular clientele. They were all a block away, but stuck in traffic for an hour and a half. So you know how that happens. So once you map out your whole night and everything gets pushed back, it just falls apart. I mean, and then everyone's coming at one time and is pushing back the orders, and all I know is when I would get picked up from work from my husband every night, he would pick me up in front, and he called me and said, "I'll be there at such and such a time." I said, "Don't come anywhere near the restaurant. Go over 3 blocks. I'll walk over and I'll meet you over there." So I got through the shift. It was horrendous. I mean, I, I think we went to a restaurant after I had 4 margaritas in about 3 minutes, and I'm not even a drinker. But and everyone was looking at me like, "Oh my God, he's going to be so drunk." But in any event, what I would do would normally I would get in the car when my husband would pick me up, and that therapy of telling your night what happened, and these people came in, and this happened, and somebody spilled this, and da da da, and so normally I just walk out and he gets the brunt of it. He's like my therapist in the car. But because I was 3 blocks away walking over there, I, in my head, was replaying the night. So by the time I got to him, I got in the car and I just let it out. I'm just talking away and I'm blabbering about all this stuff. And I look to my left. It's not my car. It's not my husband. I'm in a complete stranger's car. And the guy's like this. Like, he was totally mortified. And I look over and my husband's waving across. He was on the other side of the street. But both cars had blinkers on. They were double parked. So I didn't even look. I just got in there. We laughed so hard. And what's really sad about that whole thing is that has happened to me 3 times in my lifetime.
Oh my,
Not
oh my
once,
God.
3 times. And this poor man, this was well before Uber. So it wasn't like you got in the car thinking you were getting an Uber. He was just waiting for somebody who was in Tower Records. And I got in the car and I didn't even give him a chance to even open his mouth other than, because I think he thought I was a murderer or something, but because I was so
I
wound up from the night. So that had to be one of the worst nights of my life
I
in the
did not
restaurant business.
see that twist coming. That is You knocked the wind out of me there. And I think the universe, has a way of providing, and that definitely after a shift like that, needed to happen. And it that because I was getting triggered enough just thinking about listening to the shift itself, because it does feel when things like that happen where either traffic or whatever, or they just stack the books wrong, and it's like one of those scenes, whether it's Braveheart or those medieval movies where they're going to war and you just see all those soldiers coming over the hill and you're like the lone soldier for the losing side. Like that's what working in a restaurant when you get 10 seats, or you get sat 10 right back to back. It feels like that. It's overwhelming. It's like, oh no, I'm not going to make it through. And it just, once that happens, the kitchen is hit, the bar is hit, you're hit, the dish pit is hit, and that just sets the tone for the night. And it's just going to continue because everyone is sat together. Everyone pretty much finishes around the same time. So they get up together, and then you get 10 tables again all at once. I was so triggered just listening to you talk about that, and really thinking about, because last night, as I mentioned in the opener, I had an awful shift. They stacked the books weird, and just coming off having worked Valentine's Day weekend, which was also just
Mm,
horrific because the restaurant didn't really staff properly and they can't really handle regular business. So I don't know why they chose to add more tables to the floor, and give more work for a very tiny kitchen. But it's just this series of events. And so when you're talking about how your husband's your soundboard, I came home and my partner was awake, and he said, "So how was today?" He usually knows not to ask because usually it's like it's awful. But he was,
right.
yeah. But he's like,
Can of
"How was
worms.
your shift?" And I just looked at him and I was like, "Awful." And I just like threw up all of the trauma on him. And he's a therapist, and so I try to like not make him work, especially at 11 o'clock at night, just because I work in this industry. So I definitely relate it to you there. Just having these supportive partners who really kind of prop us up. But again, I was not
Right.
expecting that you would get in the wrong car and share that. That is beautiful. I hope that ends up in your autobiography. I hope it's ended up in your
It
show.
is.
That's amazing. So I hope you don't mind that I keep emphasizing, 43 years. You told me that it's been 43 years in this industry. Because it's
Hmm.
beyond a badge of honor. It is such a huge accomplishment. And how I kind of run my life is I judge every experience based on the food that was around it. So I judge places at work not just by how they treat their staff, but how they feed their staff. Um, Movie sets and TV sets that I've been on, I judge it by the craft service, which I will say the best one ever is Miss Maisel. It felt like I was at a wedding on Long Island. There was always just so much amazing food.
Mm.
So I want to know, that's how I judge things as being good or bad, is how well was I fed. So in your 43 years, what's the best thing you've ever tasted, either as a family meal, staff meal, something at a pre-shift, something on a menu? What is the best dish you have ever had in the restaurant you've worked for?
I would say it was a dish. It was a scallops appetizer. Now, I don't even eat seafood, but it was the best thing I've ever eaten in my life. That's how good it was. And they were scallops that were slightly thin. They were thinly sliced, and then they were on a bed of a caramelized onion and muscle cream and a little bit of Gruyere cheese, and they melted it. They put it in the broiler, and they would serve it. And I can't even tell you this. They used to call me Mr. Scallops because I would sell so many of them. But for me, as someone who loves being in the service business, I have to be very honest. If I love something, I love it more than anybody else. If I don't like something, I won't sell it because even if I'm not the type of waiter that says, "Oh, that's fabulous. Oh, that's marvelous." I'm because even if I said that, my face would say something different. My yeah, and so I think that the success I've had in the business is because and the reason why I have so many repeat clients and families that I've known for 40 years that are still supporting my career, I feel like it's because I'm genuine. Nothing's worse than going to a restaurant and the waiter suggesting the most expensive thing. Always. It's such a turn off to me. And it kind of relates to another story that I think my whole idea is the disconnect a little bit to now in the business is that they don't understand it's about building relationships. It's always about that moment. It's not about, so for example, if you got a bad I can think of twice in the last 10 years that I got a bad tip. And people say, "Aren't you upset?" I said, "No. You know what? Maybe they needed money more than me. I don't know. Maybe they had too much to drink. I don't know, but I'm not going to let it affect me the rest of the night. I'm just going to let it go and move on." And both times, both customers came back and gave me $100 bill because they were so mortified. One time I was in the bathroom. I came out of the bathroom. They were waiting
That's
there to give me the money. So
yes.
but I don't expect that, but it's because of gratitude. What you were talking about early. My model's always been customers may not always be right, but they're never wrong. And if you take it from that perspective, you can roll a lot off your back. The other ability that I have, and sometimes it's a detriment because if I don't train people anymore because I'm not a good trainer because they don't learn the good things from me. I can get away with saying stuff to people that other people can't, and it's about delivery. And then they try to mimic it, and they get in trouble. So I had a customer one time. Every time she came in, beautiful woman, beautiful husband, family. I've seen them all grown up. She looked stunning every time she came in. She grew up from old money in Chicago. She would wear Armani and jewelry that would just drip. I mean, it's just beautiful, but very elegant, always had. And she would come in and she never let her husband order what he wanted. Or he would, and she'd complain about it all the time. So one night they had a big party and all the food came out and she didn't get her food. And she goes, "John, where's my food?" I said, "Well, you know what? Um, I'm going to give you Don's food, your husband's food, because you never let him eat in peace anyway." so, so I said, "One day you're not going to be here, and he is going to celebrate like crazy because he's going to be able to go out and eat whatever he wants." And she looked at me, and she was so funny. She had so much elegance and class, but it had a truck driver mouth. And she said, "John, lean over. Now I know I'm going to keep it clean, so you just have to imagine." But she said, "Go f yourself." And I said, "I would, hun, but my back's really hurting tonight, so I can't." And those kids grew up watching this, and they said you're the only person that could ever get away talking to her like that. But because of it, I didn't want to teach other people those bad habits because it doesn't work for everybody.
You have to know your skill set. You have to know your talent, and it's a gift. I had a coworker named James, and he was exactly that way. And it was one, he was wonderful at his job. Two, he was sincerely hilarious and had timing like you. And he had also build these bonds, whether it's regulars that he's developed this relationship before, or whether it's somebody that he developed the relationship in the first 5 minutes. Where I one time he ran a drink to my table, and it was a beer, and it was a stout, and the woman saw it, and she looks and she goes, "Oh, I didn't realize it would be so dark." And he looked at her and he goes, "Just drink the beer and quit being a little bitch." And
Oh my God.
I walk over not knowing that this happened, and they tell me the story, and they were like, I just want you to know, please don't tell your managers, but I just want to let you know what your coworker said and just how hilarious he is. I'm like, oh, you don't need to tell me. He is absolutely hilarious. And we would use James kind of like as a tool, like to go break tension with certain tables, because he was just, it's a gift. And obviously, you have that gift, and you don't have to worry about keeping it clean on here. You say whatever you want on this podcast, but you do have to be careful when training people, like you said. I always tell people, I'm going to teach you how to pass a test. This is everything that management wants to know. This is all you have to know about the steps of service. This is how you have to know about the food. Da 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 da. I'm going to teach you all of that, and then I'm going to teach you how I get through the shift. So I'm going to teach you about the corners you cut when you have to cut corners. And then you will develop your own system, but you will never let management know about the tricks I taught you. You just have to answer these questions. And more often than not, they would do something wrong and they would say, "Who taught you that?" And they'd be like, "Oh, Sean Patrick." Like, they sold me out. Little snitches. Snitches get stitches.
I remember this lady came in. It was a really terrible night in Chicago, snowing, and it was really quiet. And I was closing, and they said, "You're going to get a 7 top." And I looked over, and the average age might have been 85. And I thought, oh wow, a lot of cappuccinos and hot tea, on a cold night in Chicago. So they sit down, they were celebrating a birthday, 7 women. And the woman said, I said, "Can I bring you something to drink? A tea, coffee, hot drink?" Because I didn't figure they would drink. And the birthday girl said, "I'll have a double doers on the rocks." And I said, "Would you like a twist with that?" And she said, "No." And I said, "Good, my feet hurt." She started laughing so hard that the woman next to her said, "Gladys," that's how old she was. "Gladys, what did he say?" He said, "It's sure good to know because my teeth hurt." I had to go in the kitchen. My contact came out. I was crying with laughter so hard. My teeth hurt.
Hey there, just checking in. I hope you're enjoying this episode so far. And if you are, why not leave us a 5-star review and a comment or two wherever you're listening to this from? And don't forget to follow us on social media at TUFF SHIFT Podcast. That's TUFF Shift Podcast. Everywhere. Literally everywhere. And just a reminder, gratuity's not included, but tips are always welcome. And you can find our virtual tip jar at tuffshiftpodcast.com. That's TUFF shiftpodcast.com. All right, back to the show. I mean, it sounds like, obviously this is a podcast where we kind of air our grievances and share our stories, but there's not always, it's not every shift can't be a tough shift. Otherwise, you wouldn't get through it and it would affect your life as a creator. You can't be living in that headspace and create art and be happy in life. So I don't usually ask this of my guests, but is there like a shift or an experience or a guest that stands out to you in memory that just really kind of exemplifies like why you've stayed in this, or like that has been so wonderful that it's just touching and they still touch your heart, or something that you've experienced in a restaurant that stays with you today that just is a wonderful memory?
Well, there was a guest that and he's incredible guy, Herbie. Oh, I love Herbie. Anyway, Herbie was lived down the street from Mona and me, and he's I don't know how old he is now. But he looks better than me, and he's a lot better than me. But for so long, I would invite him to come to the show, and I would try to get him and his wife to come, and they never came. So one time he came, and I had that relationship with him where he'd come in, and I say, "Herbie, are you working out?" I said, "Yeah." I said, "Your ass looks good," and he had 3 boys, um, and they all live around the world, and very, very philanthropic man. So he came to the show, and the next time he came in the restaurant, he said to me, he goes, "You made me feel things in your show I haven't felt in 40 years." And that was the greatest compliment I've ever received. Maybe a mashup of my serving and singing together, um, because it wasn't
Yeah.
about me, it was about him. And as a performer, I everyone's motivated in a different way, but I motivate myself in that I try to construct shows that make people feel good, because there's enough badness and sadness and despair and all this stuff. So there's no platform for me there in music. I like people to be joyful when they come to my shows, but if you're doing it right, it's they're not thinking about you, they're thinking about them and what you're singing about. They're not worried about who I'm singing it about, or they're thinking about something in their own life, and they're connecting to the lyric. And I love, I'm working on a show called Lyrically Speaking, and it's going to be all songwriters, and really great, like a Peggy Lee song that no one's ever heard of, but it's so beautifully written. And I like to pick things that I know are going to touch other people, and they're not going to think about me. So when he said that to me, and I remember somebody asked me one time, they said, "Wow, that is nothing. He didn't say anything about your voice." Or I said, "If you're doing it right, it's not about that. It's about connecting with them." And that's how you have to be as a waiter. You have to connect with people. You have to give them the wow factor. I don't believe, when they're little kids and they come in and it's around Christmas time, you want them joyful. You want to put gifts on the table. So, and they used to think these kids would come in and think I was Santa Claus, but they were
Yeah.
like my godchildren. And, I became a part of their family. But it's more about wowing them. Anybody can go in and eat dinner. It's the experience of how you pay it forward, and that's the difference.
Yeah, I agree, and it's something that I have to remind myself of, because I do sometimes get overwhelmed. I do, when it's like, oh, you have a 10 top, and it's like two adults and eight children. I'm like, son of a bitch, like they're like grilled cheese only runs up a check so much. But I had a wonderful experience growing up in restaurants. Every Sunday after church, we would go to the Millbrae Pancake House. It's right outside of San Francisco. And those ladies, I also, grew up watching in syndication, It's a Living, which is like no wonder I ended up in this industry. I
Oh,
was just like, I see these waitresses and their celebrities on TV, and then I go, and it was pretty much, it was like from the restaurant is like from the 60s or 50s, and it still looked like the wood paneling, and even the way that everything was carved out, the copper pans and cookware used as decoration, and the outfits that these women wore were the old school waitress dresses. Like they could have been on Alice for all intents and purposes. And every Sunday, this place was a madhouse. It was so busy. Every church in the area got out at the same time, and they all descended on this restaurant. And those women made us feel like celebrities. Every week, whether they were or not, just seemed so happy to see us. We would get our hot chocolates, and they would just put like more whipped cream than hot chocolate. I don't know how they managed to get that all to fit on the cup. Um, and it was such a magical thing. And even as I grew up, when I would come back from college and we'd go there, just greet it with big hugs. And I remember you when your mom brought you in. I remember when your mom was still pregnant with you. I watched you grow. And it's so overwhelming. It is kind of like their godmothers. And that's something that I hold dear in my heart. And it's something that I have to remind myself of, that, like, yes, waiting on children and families is and can be extremely annoying, but you never know the impact you have on someone's life. And so that's one thing that I use to remind myself of how to treat people. Is like, just remember how you were treated and the magic that people created for you. And so it's really beautiful. I'm glad you shared that, and I'm gonna remember that for this weekend's shifts, because I got a few coming up. It's going to be a long weekend, but I want to also segue into, as you kind of already did, into your performing life. You have a show coming up called Lyrically Speaking, which is exactly what I want to know. Like, where do you find the titles for the shows, and what inspires you to create shows? How do you say, you know what? I want to do this and I want to do that. Where does the inspiration come? Is it like, are you just like cooking eggs and you're like, oh, I got to do a Cole Porter show, or you walk in outside and all of a sudden you're like, you know what, I need to. Where does the inspiration come to where you're just like, I have to do a show?
Well, I think the other thing that this is a segue back into that, but and you can relate to this, as somebody who uh, is in the restaurant business, you can't really go into a restaurant and eat and enjoy it like other people do, because you look around at everything, because you're watching, because you've been on the other side of it. The same thing with theater. You go to a show, some people just enjoy it, and I enjoy it, but I'm looking at the sounds, and I'm looking at the orchestra, and I'm looking at the wings to see what, and how it's that whole mentality of, you have a different
Yes.
perspective because you've been on both sides of it. But I think that I forget the
So
question. Yeah.
um, we are
Been
two
up
peas
to
in
the
a pod.
42 years.
I get the same way. Even when I start asking questions, I'm like, wait, I've been talking for 5 minutes. What was I? And I'm supposed to be asking you a question. I want to know where you get your inspiration to create shows.
Oh, Oh, well, I think, as a little kid, I would tell people, when I was 2 years old, my earliest memory, a lot of people don't have early memories. I do. And I was the youngest of six kids, and my mother would work nights as a nurse. She was really one of these old wartime nurses. Mom, I sprained my ankle. Walk on it. I mean, we got no sympathy. We never pampered ourselves. We just worked and worked and worked. We didn't. If I was sick and I had a test, I'd go to school. I mean, all the kids, we all got full scholarships to college. I mean, which is unheard of. Six children. But the biggest thing is that she would come home and I'd be wide awake because I'd slept all night. And my brothers and sisters would leave, my father would leave, and my mother would want to lay down because she was working the night shift. So we would go in her room and she would close all the shades. And I sat there and I didn't want to move because she was a light sleeper. So if she thought I wasn't sleeping, then she wouldn't sleep well. So I created these moments in my head of being creative back then, thinking of things. And I know that that has a part of it, and the riot is the heinous part of it. No, not the heinous. The uncanny thing about that is that years later, fast forward, my mother had double surgery on her knees, replacement, and I was driving around. She lived in the suburbs of Chicago, and she said, "You, of all the kids, you never gave us trouble from the minute you came home, even when you were two, and I wanted to sleep, and you acted like you were sleeping." I'm like, you knew that the whole time? You never told me? Like, so I think that my passions were developed. I feel like, between writing, I love writing. I love performing. I love producing shows. I like writing shows. I like my baking business. I mean, I have, I feel like, a lot of people say you should just focus on one. Oh no, it's too easy to just focus on one. I like that buffet. You don't have to eat from the whole buffet
It's
all the
it's
time, but
nice
you
to have the
sure can enjoy
options.
the whole
Yeah.
buffet. And yeah, and so I think that part that really helped me. I research like older music like Joni Mitchell. There's a song called "A Case of You." And the lyric of it is so beautiful. And then I could look at an Elton
Hmm.
John song like the last song, which to this day, or a Michael Callan song, "Love Don't Need a Reason," things that people go, where do you find your music? That's the best compliment after a show when somebody says to me, I get your set list and all those songs and where I can get the recording. To me, that's a compliment because that's what I want. I want people to be touched when they leave, you know. And so I spent a lot of time doing that, looking for music, researching, and I've worked with two of the greatest pianists in the world. They're really good, really are my best friends as well. But one is extraordinary, Becky Menzie, who is like an icon in Chicago and has played, for everyone from Michael Feinstein to, Audra McDonald, and she does all. And she's the type of person where we would go to a gig and we would hire these musicians that we never met. And these musicians, you know how musicians are, they want their 3 hours and they're gone. They had so much fun playing with us and especially playing with her that they wanted to continue. They didn't care because they wanted the opportunity to work with her. And she has that innate ability where she could, you could go to her gig and say, "Oh, will you do this song?" She'll go, "I don't, just hum a few words of it." And they'll hum it, and then she'll sing it like she's sung it for 40 years. That's the talent. And then Chuck Larkin, who's another dear friend of mine, he plays, he was the assistant director for, musical director for Jersey Boys touring company, and for many years. And he is the gift of touch. It's extraordinary. I mean, he's extraordinary. The two of them. So I feel like you have to pick great music. You have to surround yourself with people that are talented, that you love, and you are so proud to be a part of working with. Because my dad told me early on, the people you surround yourself speaks volumes of the person you are. And so I look at every facet. The people that I'm closest in the restaurant business, everyone always says, "Oh my God, those friends are so nice." Well, it's not by accident. It's because I choose to gravitate towards people like that. And you know, and we are learning that now the hard way, in modern day politics. But who you surround yourself with is what is really what makes it successful. So I think that maybe the passion part of it came from a very early age, and it's just something that I don't believe. Let me just tell you this. I'll tell you this story. And I wasn't planning on talking about this, but Becky Menzie, who I know here in Chicago, she, when she turned 40, which is only 3 years ago, I'm sure she'll love that when she hears that. She, I had a rehearsal with her 6 months before for a show, and she had an upright piano that was on 2x4s. And I would go to these homes that had beautiful pianos that never got played. They were just pieces of furniture. So I came home and I wrote in my journal, "Buy Becky a grand piano for her 40th birthday." The next day I called our other dear friend, Becky and Tom and I, or Tom Michael and I have been best friends for 35 years. And he sings a lot with her and they do a duo shows and stuff a lot. And I said, "I want to do this." And he says, "How are you ever going to do it?" I said, I'm just telling you, I'm going to do it. So I came up with this idea of selling 88 keys for $100 and raise $8,800 to give for her 40th so that she could go out and buy a grand piano. So at the same time, I was recording my CD. And the guys in the studio are like, "Oh, Becky, what kind of piano do you buy?" Will you stop asking your question? We got 6
Exactly.
months
Don't
before
get
we
ahead of
went
the
to
surprise.
2 weeks it took for me to sell those 88 keys. That's how beloved she is in Chicago. What an icon she is. What a legend she is. So we end up having a party. I told her we're going to invite a few friends. She pulls up and there's 100 people there. She's like, "A few friends." So she knew something was going on. But what we did was we gave it to her. We had people bring fake gifts. And then we had the box made with an encyclopedia. And it was pianoforte circled. And when she opened it, it was this huge encyclopedia and said, "Open to page 684 or whatever." And it was pianoforte. And there was an envelope and it says, "For all the love and music you've shared with us, we so lovingly give back to you on your 40th birthday. And she didn't know what to do. And so we kind of finished the party and all this stuff. Now fast forward, she goes to summer stock down in Indiana, summer wagon wheel theater. She comes back. She decides the money she made from the CD, she was going to put with this money and maybe get a secondhand piano. So she went to Petrov's downtown in Chicago, Petrov Pianos. And the guy, she told him the story. He started crying. He went in the back room. He comes out. He said, I just talked to the general manager. Any piano you want, we will give it to you at cost. Because we've never heard a story like that in our life. She got a $24,000 grand solid mahogany grand piano. And to this day, it's the greatest thing. See, so when people say you can't do something, I'm more determined to do it. I mean, bring it on, I say, So to me, that and so every time we go now to her home, that piano's there. And it we know the history of it. And we made a video. We videotaped the whole thing. And I still watch this day and cry because it was everyone that loved her. 122 names of people, a lot of theater people, a lot of supporters that I knew that she's known, and so she to me that legacy is one of my favorite things in my life.
It's beautiful, and it does speak to the power of community and the ability, like you said, when people say you can't do this, how are you going to do it? Be like, well, I'm creative. I'm going to be creative in it, and we can find way. I don't have the money in my bank account, but we can get there if we're open to making it work. We will be open to receiving what we need to make it work. And I'm blown away by that story, because as touching it is for you, all those, every single 88 key that was sponsored, you're forever a part of the music she creates. That's such a beautiful memory. Thank you so much for sharing that. I love it. It really just speaks to the power of building and nurturing community. And it seems like, tying it back to the story of, when you were 2 years old, your empathy for people has kind of been nurtured and has created a wonderful career path for you, surrounded by wonderful people in the restaurant, on stage, at home. Thank you for sharing that. I want to talk a little about, because I found this very interesting on our phone call. Again, all the many hats you wear, as if you don't have enough to do in any given day. Where did the bakery come from? How did you be like, you know what, I should also sell baked goods? What was the birth of that bakery?
That was 40 years ago, 1985. I'll never forget it. We'd have these dinner parties, and this woman one of our friends made this cake. It was so gorgeous, I couldn't believe it. We couldn't wait to have that cake. We cut the cake. It was the worst cake I've ever tasted in my whole entire life. Every one of us, it was like we were choking on it. It was so bad. So I said, next year I'm going to make the cake. And so the next year I made the cake, and people said, oh my God, this is unbelievable. Oh my God. They used to have a baking business. I said, yeah, I call it Vincent Van Doe because of my middle name, Vincent, right? And it was like a kumbaya moment. I don't know where that came from, but it just came up. And it was like, wow, and my husband always says all the time, he goes, where do you come up with these ideas and these expressions? How I color things sometimes, but anyway, so it started a life of its own. But what I found by doing that, because starting it at that point, was I was really starting to do shows, and I would send out press releases, and nobody got my name right. John Milani, John Mahudi, John Mahoney. In fact, they said, oh, somebody saw you the other day in Oak Park. No, that was John Mahoney from Frasier, not me. He lived in Oak Park. Not me, but I knew it, because nobody could ever remember that name. Well, I put John Vincent Mahady, was always my stage name. And so when I would send press releases back then, you would go to the theater or you'd go to the newspapers and stuff, and you'd give the press releases, and I'd give them a box of cookies from Vince Van Gogh. And it became such an instant calling card. They immediately remembered name. They didn't really remember my name, but they remember Vince Van Gogh. And so, so that's how that started originally. And now people, customers' mind will be at a school, and the women will be in the stalls, and some of them will be talking about a cake they had. And, oh my God, that John Mahady's cake, that Vince Van Gogh cake. And then she comes out and she's like, "You know him?" But it's only, I don't do it mass scale. I do really, um, as for private events. Like I do a lot of birthdays and some weddings. I once did 800 cupcakes for a wedding in Indianapolis. That was a challenge. Ooh. But anyway, 800 all gone before the wedding was over. Now I don't know about you, but by the time
People
wedding
are
cakes
done.
usually come, people don't eat
People
good.
are done. They've had too
Yeah,
much to
they're
drink.
putting
They're
them in
on
their
the
mouth.
dance floor. Their feet hurt.
Yeah, so I feel, and I only make things, the secret to that is, again, passion. I only make things that I'm passionate about. Like if for somebody who is in the business, there's so many things. I'm such a picky eater, but I don't like cinnamon. So carrot cake, anything like that, I have to be impassioned about it to create. So a lot of times I'll just, I just did a blueberry cake, and I called it "Blew Me Away," and oh my God, it was. I brought it to this. We have a dining club of 14 people, and we go out once a month. The same friends. We've been doing it for 25 years, and I pick the restaurant all the time. Sometimes there's all 14 of us, sometimes there's 12, sometimes there's 10, but every month we do it. We do it religiously. Sometimes we have it at people's homes. And so I always bring a dessert. So I always try to create something new. And it's becoming more of a challenge now because we've been doing it for so long. But I try to do it. And so I give them this "Blew Me Away." And they have great names like "To Die For's," which is like a chocolate marshmallow cupcake with a white chocolate glaze with caramel and butterscotch and toffee chips. And somebody once ate it. The first person tasted it, they said, "Oh my God, these are to die for." And I said, "There's the name." So, it's always, you have to have your ears open, to take that in
Exactly.
and steal the
Repurpose,
yes.
you're inspired. And that is a talent in and of itself, similar to the talent you have with your guests that only you could do. It actually reminds me, I have a friend of mine, Carly Ozard, who is an amazing singer. She does cabaret, she does opera, she does musical theater, she does electronic dance music, multi-talented, but also like you, she really has a gift for puns and for coming up with ideas. And literally the names of your shows that you're lyrically speaking, Vincent Van Gogh, Blew Me Away, like you are so creative, and it's such a gift to be able to come up with something catchy. Like when I'm putting shows together, some things are easy, like it's like, oh, that makes sense, that's going to be the title of this. And sometimes it's really hard to nail a pun or to get a sentiment in a catchy phrase that isn't going to make people roll their eyes, be like, oh, okay, I haven't heard that one before. Like it is such a gift, and that's so cool. And I love, speaking of titles, I want to talk about you with the title of your book, I Heard You the First Time. Anybody who has ever waited tables is going to know what this book is about, and it's such a great way to capture the journey you're going to take us on. So I know it's still in the works, but can you tell us, what was it that inspired you to say, now's the time to share my autobiography, now's the time to share my experience, and what people can expect to find in this book?
Well, I think I really have a gift of storytelling, and
It's very Irish
I
of
have a
you to
great
be a good
memory.
storyteller.
So yeah, yeah. But I but this the woman who came in the restaurant, and she must have said the same order 42 times. And finally, I just said in a very nice way, ma'am, I got it. I heard you the first time. And I went in the kitchen. I said, and that's going to be the name of my autobiography. Again, your ears are open to hearing that. And it somehow spoke to me about it. So I started, reliving all these stories. A lot of characters in it of people, Myrtle Chill, who still had plastic covers on her furniture, and you sit in her chair and you'd be like forward because it was so old and way, and she lived in the building, and she was a character in herself, but or the woman who walked in and said, I'd like the butter lettuce salad, hold the butter, I mean, those kind of things. You never, I have such a good memory on all those. I once had a customer who she would come in with her assistant, or not her assistant, her caregiver, and she was Asian, and she used to always say, my Oriental friend. I'm like,
Stop saying that now.
stop saying that. Right. Yeah. I'm just trying to teach you, right? And she'd say it so loud. So one night she came in with her daughter and she said, hurry up. She used to go to the same table. Nobody else would wait on her. So I took her to the table and I started walking. She goes, hurry, here, I have to go to the bathroom. I said, okay. So I started walking real quickly to the table. I turned around. She's halfway in the restaurant. And I said, Liz, come on. What's going on? She goes, too late. I, more information than I really needed to know. Too late. So he read, or the family of 10 that, the one kid throws up his whole food and they just keep eating. We're cleaning it up. They just keep eating like nothing, like it's normal, like.
You're killing me.
So, and I don't do, I don't do a lot of imitations, and I'm not going to use the name because everybody know who it is. But one of the people that was one of the owners of the restaurants I worked at, he talked like this all the time. And he had been here for 40 years from another country, and he still screwed up one word every time he spoke. And so early on, he would say, tonight we be very busy. I want everybody to put on their toes. I start. He just talked just like that. I would laugh so hard. And he goes, hey, bum, you keep that up, you be on my
That
shift
sounds.
list. So it just continued the whole thing. So he would go. So I go in the key. He used to walk in the key, go, hey, hey. And so I used to go in, and everybody would run because they think he was there, And if you ever heard of, and to the point where I used to do the imitation so much that people would ask me to do it, and then they would talk to this guy and start laughing because he talked it like that. One day he was in the kitchen of our sister restaurant across the hall, and he was fighting with the general manager of the two restaurants. And I went over to get some desserts, and they're fighting, going back. Finally, this general manager says, I'm not going to talk to you anymore. You're an asshole. So he starts to walk away, and he goes, hey, Chris, fuck you. F-O-K-U. F-O-K-U. So the chapter on him is called F-O-K-U.
That's hilarious because as you're sharing this story, I'm thinking. So my grandmother, my abuelita, was from El Salvador. And it was the exact same thing.
wow.
Like, she came to a country, she learned a new language, but what was so adorable, which, it always annoyed her that it would make us laugh, but it was so adorable when she would make those types of mistakes, and it was endearing. And she was like, why'd you make fun of me? But she had one of the many, many cute little things she did was my aunt was saying, fuck this, fuck, da, 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 da. And she go, Evelyn, I don't like that word. And she goes, what word, Mom? And she goes, that F-U-K word. And the exact same thing. And it's like, and they're serious, but it's just so adorable. You can't help but laugh.
And he was so proud that he said this. And I'm thinking, he has no idea what he just said. nor did he spell it right.
Nobody correct
Right?
him. Nobody correct
and,
him.
and we just started laughing. Nobody
It's
corrected
too
him.
great of a
No,
story.
because it's too great a story,
That's hilarious. So
Yeah.
is there like a timeline for when people should expect to see this book for sale?
Oh, I've been trying to do it. So I'm working with somebody I went to Northwestern with who's was in journalism, but I don't want to lose my voice in it. Like I want it to be in my voice. So I don't want a rigid. I like telling a story in my voice, in my humor. The little things that I pun. And so. I'm trying, in the last 3 years with some health issues, I figured this is a good time to do it. And so I'm, like they say, shit or get off the pot. I need to finish it. So, I have a lot of it written, but it's combining and figuring out how the structure of it should be. And I was even thinking that I would include a CD in that, of music that kind of goes along, because in the show I heard you the first time, I would tell a story and the song would relate to the story. So there's a great parody that Ann Hampton Calloway gave me one time called is to um, the song "Send in the Clowns." It's called uh, uh, "Where Are My Clams." Isn't this quiche? What's this appear? I ordered Chateaubriand medium rare, and where are my clams? And the whole thing, it just goes on and on. But it's such a great thing. I mean, I love it. I mean, people ask for it all. I'm so tired of doing it because I've done it so much. But it is for people that haven't heard it. It's funny because, especially in restaurant business, they always laugh and they always say, "Oh, where are my clams?" They make jokes about it. That's how much they
That
remember the
is
song.
phenomenal.
Yeah, but the whole idea is that they're complaining about the clams, and at the end they realize, oh, don't bother, they're here. Like the whole time they've been complaining, they're there, but they just didn't see them. So, so uh, so hopefully it will be um, no later. I want to get it done by the end of this year, if not at the very beginning of the year. Um, and as I get older and my hair gets grayer, at least I still have it. I want, I want to, I want to, and why my memory's still pretty good. I want to, I don't want to be at that point where I'm thinking, what was I writing about again?
It's hilarious that everything you say just like kind of triggers me a little bit because it's exactly that. That parody is perfect because don't bother, they're here. The amount of times that somebody orders something and they're in their phone, they're in their conversation or whatever their mind is doing, and like, and where's my glass of wine? And it's like it's been sitting in front of you for the last 5 minutes, my dear. But talking about phones in our conversation, you mentioned that you come up from a time where servers were not on their cell phones all the time, were not getting in trouble for being on their cell phones instead of focusing on their tables. As we kind of start to wrap up this episode, what is something in the 43 years or some changes that you have noticed in the industry, either good, bad, or ugly?
Well, I feel that the one thing that is not good is cell phones, because I think it takes away from the time you can engage with people. I mean, waiters always say to me, "How do you know so many people?" Because I invest time in getting to know them. I'm not on my cell phone. The greatest gift is putting that away. I mean, we came up from a structure we didn't. Um, uh, on the other hand, the one good thing, even though I'm not tech savvy, that whole thing with splitting checks, which could be a nightmare, now with these new computers, it makes it like a walk in the park. And we had to do it mentally, writing it down. And now waiters, they can't even. A waiter came up to me one time. She came up to me and she said, "I need to get a slice of cottage cheese." I said, "Well, that's not all you need, but anyway, but she also says, she goes, I have a check for exactly $100, and they want to split it between two people. So how much is that each?" And I said, "You don't know. You can't do that math in your head." And she goes, "Oh, no, but I can pull out a calculator and do it." So, but that's the one good thing about the computers now is that, you can do it. You can put any amount and it will, now they can split it evenly for you.
Exactly.
You don't even have to do the math. So I think that, there are things technologically that, or
Hmm.
the handheld things they use now that, before when we used to have to run down the kitchen or, whatever, where I think that technology has really helped a lot. But the phones are not one of them. They're like, I text you that we're going to be 10 minutes late. Do you think I have my phone on me? If I get text all the time. Why would I mean, I would never get anything done if I was had my phone with me. But I'm the minority. I'm sure it's the same at your place. A lot of people are always on the phone.
Always,
A lot on
managers,
the phone
workers,
all the time.
everybody, and annoyingly so. Like I mentioned at the top of the show, um, guests on their phones and just leaving their phones on the table. And it's like I lived 13 years in New York. You don't put your phone down at a bar anywhere. Like you keep your phone on you because it may be in eyesight, but the moment you go to look because some hot person walked in or you know someone over there, your phone's gone, and it's bizarre that here in California, people on patio season, like in New York patio season, we tell guests like, please don't put your phone on the table for any other reason than you're on a patio and it's New York and people walk by and you won't even see your phone go. And here in LA, people just like put their phone, they go to the bathroom, they go outside to have a cigarette, and people are just so trusting here, and they leave their phones everywhere. They're on their phones, which again, you came to a restaurant to connect with people, and also they'll be on their phones and then they complain their food is cold. It's like, yeah, because you've been on TikTok for 20 minutes, of course your food is cold. Anyway, that's my complaint about it, so I'm glad we're on the same page with that. As we're wrapping up, I just want to let people know where they can find you, and correct me if I am wrong. You are on Instagram at John Vincent Mahady. That is John spelled like John is spelled, Vincent spelled like Vincent is spelled, in Mahady, for those of you who aren't from the Emerald Isle or don't have that blood flowing through you, that is Mahady. That you can find him on Instagram. You can also take his full name, put it together, and that's his website, johnvincentmahady.com. You can find out all about his shows. His Vincent Van Doe is on there, how to reach him, how to support him, and keep up with him because that book is going to be hilarious and I can't wait. But before we go, I like to end the show the same way with each guest. As you know, having worked in this industry as long as you have, bad news makes its way fast back to management. It makes its way online to the review, and very rarely does good news find the light of day. Which is why I like to go out of my way at work or in shows when somebody has gone out of their way or somebody has really made one of my tough shifts a little more bearable. I make sure to let management know. Just so you know, Jesse really stepped it up tonight, and he was wonderful with his tables. He was wonderful on the floor. He was running food. I always like to shout out people because that doesn't find its way back to management. So, in your experience, in your 43 years in this industry and outside of this industry, whether it's on stage, waiting on a table, in your personal life, is there someone who has made a tough shift a little easier for you that you would like to shout out and acknowledge today on this episode?
I would think Sue Kim, who was a general manager that I worked with really closely for 4 or 5 years. And the reason why I say that is that, in this business, like if you're a sommelier, a lot of times they don't want to educate you, they want to impress you with how much they know. And it's so much better to be able to speak to them so that they understand and they gain their own knowledge. Sue is extraordinary every field. I mean, it's unbelievable the amount of people when I first started working with her, how many she knew that I knew. And she also went to Northwestern, which is so funny. She was a few years behind me. So, but the thing I loved about her is she had such incredible palate and knowledge of wine, and she would talk about wine, and every person would sit there with bated breath, just waiting to hear what she had to say. And every time they walk, they say, wow, we learned more in that 20 minutes than we learned in 4 years from that sommelier. And I think that is a gift that you should be able to clone somehow, because, in this business, it's, especially in those, there's that hierarchy of, I know everything type of thing. And she, even though she owned her own restaurants and did all, she was able to relate to the staff and really give them an education and knowledge. And I respect that so much. And she's a phenomenally great woman. She could do 4 jobs at one time. And maybe that's why I like her. I mean, we're very similar in that way. We're very motivated. But she was great. And now she's a vice president at a fine dining group, which is in Jackson Hole, Wyoming. Yeah, and the guy's name is Fine. His name's Fine, so it's called Fine Dining Group, and she, I'm glad for her because she's one of, that song. I'm one of the girls who's I'm one of those girls that's really a boy or something. The one from Lauren Bacall that she was Woman of the Year, but she's one of these girls that's really a boy. You know what I mean? She can stand head to head with these other guys, and you know how it is. Women are not equal in the restaurant business. A lot of times there's the boys club, and she would just power through them. So that's who I would pick.
But Sue, this episode has been for you, and clearly the world needs more people like you. So thank you for everything that you do. This has been another episode of Tough Shift. And just remember that tough shifts build character, and character is what brings your story to life. Take care. Tough Shift was created and hosted by Sean Patrick Murtagh. It was recorded on Riverside and distributed with Buzzsprout. Don't forget to leave us a 5-star review and maybe a comment or 2. And remember, tough shifts build character, and character is what brings your story to life.